This is a video response to BernardPoolman's video, Mandela Created a Country of Greed, which is uploaded on his channel. I just want to add my perspective to this discussion that he had. From watching this video now, I would like to add the following. Living in South Africa, he basically, Bernard gave an overview in this video of the releasing, obviously, of Mandela and the consequences that they had in South Africa, where, it basically opened the point of, stopping apartheid and black empowerment and, all of that coming through, and then where basically that point in itself opened the further consequence of the greed coming through, because now there's the new black elitists in South Africa who fought for black empowerment to be in place, and now that that is in place, where basically everybody in the country, white, Indian, black, everybody agreed that, or those who did not agree were basically told, look, the majority are agreeing that the time for separation and apartheid is over, and that the time is here now for people to walk together and share the country, share the resources, work together, and that separation based on skin color is absolute nonsense, and that is to come to an end, and that now we need to catch up on the past and basically go back and empower everybody, empower the people who before were basically labeled dumb and not worthy because they have a different skin color, to the people who dominate the economic market and who have, big words and power at their disposal, basically based on, their skin color. Because you're white, you have power, and that was forced upon every other race in South Africa, and that's how it's been for hundreds of years. So the release of Mandela was cool from that perspective, because it brought in finally a point where everybody has to now work together, and there is no more thing like separation. Obviously now the point of separation that came through is now the problem that existed in the white government was greed. And everything that was done from the perspective of greed, I mean, whether your skin color was pink or black or green, it did not matter. It was not about, remember, God did not decide, if you believe that there is a God, for you to even justify that a God decided that a white race is better than a black race is absolute bullshit. Okay, if you actually go and look at that statement, and you go and ask yourself that if you were an almighty being that created all equally here in this reality, would you actually go and say, oh, but the white race is my favorite race? I mean, come on. So basically, we're getting back to a point now where equality should be in place, and now the problem is that, as I just mentioned, then the greed just changed, unfortunately, skin color. So now we're stuck with the black elitists who are taking the power position to be able to better themselves to such a point that the fraud and corruption is so extensive now in South Africa, especially in the government positions and in the positions where the black business people are getting tenders and business opportunities to basically absolutely make money, absolutely, have the ride of their lives. Basically what happened when white people were in power, and they are walking over their black brothers and sisters to be able to do that. So obviously it was never about freeing the black person. It was just to shift power to the black elitists and the black power elements who can now control, all the other people in the country for the point of greed. So my perspective within this whole point, and what I just mentioned now, was basically a background point to what I'm getting to now, is that why the Mandela era created now a new greed you could say a new greed era in South Africa, is that Mandela went as far as freeing the black person. He went as far as implementing the point of equality, and that equality should exist, and that we should from now on work towards that point. Okay, so that is great. The problem now is that the Mandela regime and the followers of the Mandela foundation and concept point of freedom and equality basically stopped there. I mean, if you look at now the outflow of the Mandela political movement, and basically everybody who stands by the Mandela point, is now that that has resulted in is that the black elitists and the people who seek power and money are now using the Mandela point to absolutely support themselves and to become rich and to dominate the rest of the country, to basically walk over those who are already disempowered and were disempowered by the white government to basically become richer. Because if you look at it like this, the people who use that which Mandela stood for, if they used that absolutely and walked that through in everything that they did, to not allow greed, to not allow corruption and fraud, then that would, if you were to use that as a foundation point, the Mandela political movement as a foundation point, to follow it through, you wouldn't have the situation that we have in South Africa. So what was the actual outflow of the Mandela political movement? Because now we've resulted in absolute corruption. I mean, it is, if you actually take an interest, and I will be doing vlogs on recent experiences that I've had where I've spoken to people who have been at the receiving end of the corruption in South Africa. I mean, living in South Africa, dealing with the government institutions, you on a daily basis. I mean, you just need to pick up the phone and phone a government service because you need something done, and you will run into the incompetence and the absolute fraud that is going on. So this is now the result of this freedom point that came through from Mandela. So the question is, why was it not followed through? Why is actual change not happening? If that is what Mandela stood for, and he was the breaking point, he was the turning point for South Africans, why have South Africans not taken that foundation point of what he stood for and walked it right through to completion? Why has it now gone to the exact same greed and corruption point that the white government stood for, based on their idea that it was God giving them permission to abuse others in the name of greed because of skin color? Now that exact same point is being used, and it is Mandela's implementation of the point of freedom which has basically allowing it. If the millions who absolutely reveled in the idea of what Mandela was doing and what he was standing for, if every single person who at that time when Mandela did that, when they put their arms up in the air and went, yes, this is it, if every single one of those still stood by those points, you would now not have the absolute corruption and greed that you have in South Africa, and the dominance of the weaker people in South Africa who don't have a say. I mean, the worker force and the people who are now supposed to get equal education, equal opportunity, and who should be taught about self-responsibility. I mean, that's most important. But instead, that's being moved aside so that the corruption and the greed in others is being supported.